It was 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday when the text arrived. My phone vibrated against the rich mahogany of my desk, a desk where I'd spent countless hours reviewing quarterly reports for my latest acquisitions. The number wasn't saved, but a cold certainty settled in my chest. I knew exactly who it was from. 12 years of absolute silence, and now my mother, Eleanor Vance, thought a casual dinner invitation could just bridge that chasm. Emergency dinner, the message read. The sheer nerve of it. Ashley, my assistant, tapped lightly before opening the door. "Miss Davis," she began, "Sarah Jenkins from Forbes is here for your 4 o'clock. Right. The interview that would officially crown me the youngest self-made female billionaire in tech." A story, it seemed, that had somehow made its way onto my parents' television in whatever modest home they'd landed in after my father, Robert Vance, had squandered his inheritance. Sarah, sharp and poised, set her recorder between us. "Let's start with your origin story," she prompted. "Our readers love a good bootstrapping narrative." I gave her the smile I'd perfected in boardrooms across 3 continents. "I started with nothing," I told her. "Absolutely nothing. Built my first software company in a studio apartment, with a used laptop and a dream." Sarah leaned forward, a skeptical glint in her eyes. "The records show you graduated from Stanford." "That's hardly nothing." My smile tightened imperceptibly. "I put myself through school. Scholarships, 3 jobs, and enough determination to power a small city." I paused, choosing my next words with care. "My family wasn't exactly in a position to help." That was an understatement. A monumental understatement. My family had, in essence, held a funeral for me, while I was very much alive. They'd scattered an empty casket, a ceremony I'd watched from across the street in a cold, driving rain. They told their entire social circle I'd passed away tragically in Costa Rica. All because I refused to marry Arthur Sterling, the son of my father's business partner, a man twice my age with far too many wandering hands and a gambling problem. The interview wrapped at 5. I had 2 hours. I called David Miller, my attorney. He picked up on the first ring. "I need you to meet me somewhere at 7 tonight," I told him, my voice steady. "Bring the Vance foreclosure documents." David had been with me from the start, back when I was building apps in that cramped studio apartment. He knew everything. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his voice laced with caution. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life," I replied. My parents still lived in their dream home, a sprawling estate in Marin County, purchased during my father's brief success in commercial real estate. What they didn't know was that, for the past 3 years, I'd been systematically buying up their debts through shell companies and intermediaries. The mortgage, the car loans, the credit cards they'd maxed out maintaining their lavish lifestyle. Every piece of paper bearing their signature now belonged to me. I dressed meticulously for dinner. A burgundy suit, tailored to perfection, that cost more than their monthly mortgage payment. Shoes that could have covered their property taxes for a year. The emerald necklace I'd bought myself last Christmas, a reminder that the only person I could truly rely on was me. David met me in the circular driveway at 6:55 p.m. He carried a worn leather briefcase, his expression grim. "Last chance to change your mind," he said quietly. I ignored him, my finger already on the doorbell. The chimes echoed through the house, the same melodic sequence I remembered from a childhood that felt like another lifetime, back when I believed my parents' love was unconditional. Eleanor opened the door. She looked older, her blonde hair now streaked with gray she tried to camouflage with highlights. Her eyes, wide with surprise at seeing me, immediately darted to the Louis Vuitton bag on my shoulder. "Chloe, you came," she said, her voice a little breathless. "No hug. And you brought someone." I gestured to David. "My attorney, David Miller. I don't go anywhere without him these days." Robert appeared behind her. He seemed to have shrunk, his shoulders hunched in a way I didn't recognize. Come in," he insisted, though the cheer felt forced. We're so glad you could make it. The house felt different. Shabbier. The Persian rug in the entryway was worn thin, the paint on the walls faintly yellowed. Small, insidious signs of financial stress, carefully hidden beneath a thin veneer of maintenance. We gathered in the dining room, where Eleanor had set out her best china. The table could have seated 12, but tonight, it was just the 4 of us. 5, if you counted the ghost of the girl I used to be. My father cleared his throat. We saw you on the news. That interview last month with Bloomberg. Very impressive. Thank you, I replied, placing my napkin in my lap with deliberate precision. I've worked hard to get where I am. Eleanor served pot roast, the same meal she'd made every Sunday when I was growing up. The smell triggered a rush of memories I'd spent years burying. Sunday dinners, where my parents praised my older brother, Michael, for his utterly mediocre law career, while my computer science degree was dismissed as a nice hobby. We wanted to talk to you about something important, Robert began, cutting into his meat. Family matters. I sipped my water, waiting. Your brother Michael is going through a difficult time, he continued. His firm let him go, and he's behind on his mortgage. We've been helping where we can, but our resources are limited. There it was. The real reason for the emergency dinner. Eleanor reached across the table, her hand stopping just short of mine. We know you've done well for yourself, she said, her voice soft, almost pleading. Better than anyone expected. And family helps family. I set down my fork. The sharp sound of silver against china echoed in the sudden silence. Family helps family, I repeated slowly, letting the words hang in the air. That's an interesting perspective. My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat. We understand you might have some hard feelings about the past, Chloe, but that was a long time ago. We all make mistakes. Mistakes? The word tasted like ash in my mouth. Is that what you call it? David opened his briefcase. The click of the latches made Eleanor flinch. I was 19 years old, I said, my voice steady, though a tempest brewed inside me. You told me to marry Arthur Sterling or get out. When I chose to leave, you held a funeral. An actual funeral. With flowers and a casket and a minister giving a eulogy. Eleanor's face went pale. We were upset. You have to understand, Arthur came from a good family. The merger would have saved your father's company. So you declared me gone, I finished for her. Told everyone I passed away in a backpacking accident in Costa Rica. Collected sympathy cards and casseroles from the neighbors. My voice dropped, barely a whisper. I watched from across the street. Did you know that? I stood there in the rain while a stranger sobbed over my empty casket. Robert's jaw tightened. You're being dramatic. We did what we thought was best. Best for whom? I leaned back. In my chair. Certainly not for me. I was without a home for 3 months. Slept in my car, showered at the university gym, ate ramen twice a day when I could afford it. All because I wouldn't marry a man who made my skin crawl. David pulled out the first document. These are the mortgage papers for this property. As of 6 months ago, the loan was sold to Meridian Holdings LLC. Eleanor looked utterly bewildered. What does that have to do with anything? Meridian Holdings is one of my companies. I accepted the papers from David and slid them across the table. I own your mortgage. Along with your car loans, your credit cards, and that personal loan you took out last year from Michael's father-in-law. The color drained from Robert's face. You can't be serious. I'm always serious about business. David distributed more documents, each one a thread in the financial web I'd woven around them. You're currently 4 months behind on the mortgage. The cars are 6 weeks from repossession. The credit cards are in collections. Eleanor's hands shook as she picked up a paper. Why would you do this? Because I wanted you to understand what it feels like to have nothing, I told them. To face the possibility of losing everything because the people who were supposed to love you decided you weren't worth their support. I pulled out my phone and opened my photo gallery. The first image was from 12 years ago, a selfie I'd taken in my car the night they locked me out. My eyes were swollen from crying, my face puffy and heartbreakingly young. This was me the night you chose Arthur Sterling over your own daughter. I was terrified. Alone, convinced I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. I swiped to the next photo. Me in that studio apartment, sitting on a donated mattress, my laptop open, surrounded by code printouts and empty coffee cups. This was 6 months later. I'd just landed my first major client. Made $20,000 for an inventory management system I built in 3 weeks. Another swipe. Me at my first office, a tiny space above a dry cleaner in Brooklyn. Then my second office, a real suite with a receptionist. Then cutting the ribbon at my headquarters in Chicago, a glass tower in Midtown. Every step of the way, I built something from nothing. No family money, no connections. Just talent, stubbornness, and the absolute certainty that I would prove you wrong. Robert pushed away from the table. If you came here to gloat, Chloe, you've made your point. You win. You're successful, and we're not. I didn't come here to gloat. I stood, smoothing the skirt of my suit. I came here to give you a choice, which is more than you gave me. David handed me one more document. This one was different, printed on ivory paper with gold lettering. This is a full forgiveness agreement. Every debt you owe to me, wiped clean. The mortgage, the loans, everything. You'll own this house free and clear, and I'll transfer enough money to your account to cover your expenses for the next 5 years. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. Really? On one condition. I placed the document on the table between us. You hold another funeral. This time, for the daughter you actually lost. You invite everyone who came to the first one, and you tell them the truth, that I didn't pass away in Costa Rica, that you disowned me for refusing an arranged marriage, and held a fake funeral out of pride and embarrassment. The silence stretched, broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Robert's face turned crimson. You want us to humiliate ourselves in front of the entire community? I want you to tell the truth, I said, tapping the document. Something you should have done 12 years ago. You have 72 hours to decide. If you agree, David will handle all the arrangements. If you refuse, foreclosure proceedings begin Monday morning. Eleanor looked between the paper and my face. People will think we're monsters. You are monsters, I said, collecting my bag. You just hid it well behind country club memberships and charity galas. The difference is, now you'll have to own it. We left them at that dining table, the pot roast growing cold, the weight of their choices finally catching up. In the car, David was quiet for several blocks. Do you think they'll do it? Honestly, I replied, watching the expensive houses roll past the window, each one hiding its own family secrets, I don't know. But either way, I win. If they agree, everyone knows the truth. If they refuse, they lose everything, and I'll still expose them during the foreclosure proceedings. My phone buzzed. A text from Michael, my older brother, who hadn't spoken to me in 12 years. Leave Mom and Dad alone. They don't deserve this. I typed back quickly. They declared me gone and scattered my ashes. I'm just returning the favor with their dignity. Tell me again who doesn't deserve what. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. He didn't respond. The next day, Forbes published the article. Sarah Jenkins had titled it, Rising from the Ashes, How Chloe Davis Built a Billion-Dollar Empire from Nothing. It detailed my journey from a young woman without a home to a tech mogul, though I'd kept the specific details about my family vague. No need to air all the dirty laundry in a puff piece. Ashley buzzed me around noon. Your father is here. He doesn't have an appointment. I considered sending him away, making him wait. Playing the power games he'd taught me so well. Send him in. Robert entered my office like a man walking to his own execution. He seemed to have aged another decade overnight, his confident stride replaced by something hesitant and small. Impressive space, he said, looking around at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Chicago. You've done well. Did you come here to compliment my real estate choices? He sat without an invitation, sinking into the leather chair across from my desk. We'll do it. The funeral, the truth, all of it. Your mother is already calling people. I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No vindication. Just a hollow emptiness where my family used to be. David will send over the paperwork. Robert nodded, but didn't get up. For what it's worth, Chloe, I am proud of you. What you've accomplished, it's extraordinary. You don't get to be proud, I stated, the words flat. Pride is for parents who stand by their children when things get hard. Not for people who fake funerals because their daughter wouldn't play along with their business schemes. His voice was quiet. Arthur Sterling's company went bankrupt 4 years ago. He's in prison now for embezzlement. You were right to refuse him. We were wrong to push. I know I was right, I said, turning to my computer screen, dismissing him with a gesture. I've always known. I learned to trust my own judgment the night you locked me out. Best lesson you ever taught me, even if you didn't mean to. He stood slowly, his hand resting briefly on the back of the chair. Will you come to the funeral? No, I said. I'll be exactly where I was the first time. Across the street, watching from a distance. Some things should come full circle. The funeral was held on a Saturday morning, at the same chapel they'd used 12 years ago. I parked my Tesla down the block, close enough to see, but far enough to stay hidden. David sat beside me. This feels surreal, he murmured, watching the crowd gather. The same people who'd attended my fake funeral filed in, neighbors, country club friends, my father's business associates. But this time, my parents stood at the entrance, greeting each guest with something that looked suspiciously like shame. Through the open doors, I could see Pastor Thompson at the podium. I'd done my research, he'd been horrified when Robert called to explain. He'd agreed to officiate only after my father promised a substantial donation to the church's homeless outreach program. The irony wasn't lost on me. Eleanor wore black, as she had before, but this time there was no dramatic weeping, no performance. She stood straight and silent, accepting the confused looks and whispered questions. Michael arrived late, his wife gripping his arm, her face furious at what this meant for their social standing. Michael's own face was unreadable. The service began. I opened my car window slightly, catching fragments of Robert's voice. We lied to you all. Our daughter is alive. We disowned her. We are ashamed of what we did. Murmurs grew louder. Someone got up and left. Then another. Within minutes, half the congregation had walked out. I watched Mrs. Helen Carter, Eleanor's former best friend, stand abruptly and march toward the exit. She'd been the first to bring over a casserole 12 years ago, sobbing about what a lovely girl I'd been. Now her face was crimson with fury. Behind her, the Wilsons gathered their things with barely concealed disgust. These were the people my parents had desperately wanted to impress, the social circle that mattered more than their own daughter's happiness. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Is this really necessary? You've made your point. Michael. Still trying to protect our parents, even as they confess the truth to the world. I typed back, you stood at my funeral and gave a eulogy. You cried actual tears over an empty box. Was that necessary? 3 dots appeared, then vanished. He didn't respond. David shifted. Your father's breaking down up there." I looked back. Robert had stepped away from the podium, his shoulders shaking. For a moment, something flickered in my chest. Not sympathy, exactly. More like the ghost of what sympathy used to feel like, back when I believed parents were supposed to protect their children unconditionally. "He'll recover," I said flatly. "Men like him always do." But watching him crumble did something unexpected. It pulled me back to a specific memory. I was 7, maybe 8, and I'd fallen off my bike in the driveway. My knee was bleeding, gravel embedded in the skin. Robert had scooped me up without hesitation, carried me inside, and spent an hour carefully removing every piece of debris, telling me stories to distract from the pain. That version of my father had felt safe, protective, real. What happened to that man? When did concern for social status replace concern for his actual children? The answer came to me as I sat there watching the funeral unfold. It was gradual. A series of small compromises that accumulated into something monstrous. The business deal that required schmoozing the right people. The country club membership that demanded a certain image. The realization that daughters could be currency in the world of wealthy families looking to merge empires through marriage. By the time I was 19 and refusing to play along, they were already too far gone to see me as anything other than an obstacle to their ambitions. A woman I didn't recognize approached the podium. Younger than my parents, maybe in her 40s, with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor. She spoke softly, but her words carried through the open doors. "I'm Maria Rodriguez, and I didn't know Chloe Vance. I'm here because Eleanor called me 3 days ago and asked me to attend. She wanted you all to hear from someone who understands what it's like to lose a child through your own actions." The remaining crowd settled into uncomfortable silence. 7 years ago, my son told me he was gay. I told him to leave and never come back. I said terrible things, things I can't take back. He left, and I didn't hear from him for 5 years. 5 years of wondering if he was alive, if he was safe, if he disliked me as much as I deserved to be disliked. Maria's voice cracked. He finally reached out last year. Not because he forgave me, but because his partner convinced him that closure was important for his own healing. We met for coffee, and he was a stranger. The boy I'd raised was gone, replaced by a man who'd built a life without me. A good life, a happy life, a life he created in spite of my rejection, not because of my support. She looked directly at Eleanor. "Eleanor asked me to speak because she wanted you to understand that this isn't just about her family's lies. It's about every parent who chooses pride over love, status over substance, comfort over doing what's right." Chloe Vance survived her parents' rejection and became extraordinary. But she shouldn't have had to survive her own family. The chapel was completely silent now. Even the people who'd stayed out of morbid curiosity seemed affected by Maria's testimony. David handed me a tissue. I hadn't realized I was crying. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "I don't know what I am." The tears surprised me. I'd convinced myself I was past feeling anything about my parents beyond a cold satisfaction at their downfall. But Maria's words had cracked something open, a sealed chamber where I'd locked away the grief of losing my family. Because that's what it was, grief. Not for the parents standing in that chapel, confessing their sins, but for the parents I'd once believed they were. For the childhood I thought was happy, before I understood the conditions attached to their love. For the fantasy that families were supposed to be safe harbors instead of strategic alliances. Eleanor took the podium after Maria stepped down. She pulled out a piece of paper, her hands trembling so badly she could barely hold it steady. "I want to read something I wrote to Chloe but never sent. I wrote it 6 years ago, on what would have been her 25th birthday, if she'd actually passed away." She cleared her throat, struggling to get the words out. "Dear Chloe, today you would be 25. I keep thinking about all the milestones we'll never share. I won't help you pick out a wedding dress, or hold your children, or grow old watching you build your life. I did this to us. Not the accident in Costa Rica that never happened, but the real tragedy. I chose my comfort over your happiness. I told myself it was about securing your future. But the truth is, I was terrified of what people would think if you refused Arthur. I was weak, and I made you pay for my weakness. I hope wherever you are, you're happy. I hope you've forgiven me, even though I don't deserve it. I hope you've become everything I was too small-minded to see you could be. Your mother. She folded the paper with shaking fingers. I never sent it because I was too much of a coward to face what I'd done. But my daughter isn't gone. She's very much alive, and she's achieved more in 12 years than I've achieved in my entire life. She did it without us, in spite of us, and that's something I'll have to live with forever. Another wave of departures. The Sterlings left angrily, Arthur's mother shouting something I couldn't make out. Good. Let them feel the weight of their choices too. These people left quietly, shaking their heads. The judgment was somehow worse than the outrage. I watched Eleanor watch them go. Her face held an expression I'd never seen before. Not embarrassment or shame, though they were certainly present. It was acceptance. The acceptance that comes from finally speaking truth after years of living a lie, regardless of the cost. Did you know she wrote that? David asked. No, I replied, but it doesn't change anything, does it? I turned to him. David had been my advocate for a decade, seen me at my lowest, helped build me up. If anyone had earned the right to challenge me, it was him. What are you saying? I'm saying that revenge is satisfying in the moment, but it's not sustaining long-term, he said gently. I've watched you build this empire, and it's incredible. But I've also watched you carry this anger like a second skeleton. It's kept you upright, sure, but it's also made you rigid. So, I should just forgive them? Pretend the last 12 years didn't happen? I'm saying you might want to consider that forcing them to tell the truth isn't about them anymore, David responded. It's about you finally being able to move forward without their ghost hanging over every achievement. Before I could respond, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number from Denver, my corporate headquarters. Miss Davis, Ashley's voice came through. This is Ashley from security. We have a situation. Someone claiming to be your brother, Michael, is in the lobby demanding to see you. I checked my watch. Michael must have left the funeral early to drive into the city. Tell him I'm not available. He's causing a scene. Should we call the police? I sighed. No, I'll handle it remotely. Put him on the phone. There was a pause, some muffled conversation. Then Michael's voice, tight with anger. You really are something, you know that? Mom's up there humiliating herself, and you can't even show your face. I told them I'd be exactly where I was the first time, I shot back. I keep my promises, unlike some people. What's that supposed to mean? You promised at my funeral that you'd always remember me. That you'd make me proud. How'd that work out, Michael? Did you remember me while you ignored my emails for years? Did you make me proud when you blocked my number? You left us. You chose some stupid computer degree over family. I chose myself over being sold off like livestock, I countered, my voice rising. There's a difference. Michael's breathing was ragged through the phone. Arthur would have taken care of you. The merger would have saved Dad's company. We would have been secure. Arthur was a predator, and Dad's company failed anyway, I checked. He filed for bankruptcy 8 months after I left. So all of this, the funeral, the lies, the destroyed relationships, it was for nothing. You sacrificed your sister for a sinking ship. The line went quiet for so long I thought he'd hung up. Then, I didn't know about Arthur. I mean, Dad said he was a good guy. Solid prospects. Dad said a lot of things that weren't true. You believed him because it was easier than questioning whether your parents were capable of being wrong. And you're so perfect? You bought up their debts just to torture them? That's not justice, Chloe. That's cruelty. No, Michael. Cruelty is what they did to me. This is consequences. There's a difference, though I don't expect you to understand it. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking, adrenaline coursing through me. David was watching me with that analytical expression he got when he was working through a complex legal problem. Your brother might have a point, not you two. Hear me out. You've proven everything you needed to prove. You're successful beyond measure. You forced your parents to face their actions publicly. At what point does continuing to engage with them become more damaging to you than to them? I looked back at the chapel. The funeral was wrapping up. My parents stood alone at the entrance, greeting the few remaining attendees who'd chosen to stay. They looked small, diminished. 12 years ago, they'd seemed so powerful, so certain in their righteousness. Now they just looked like two scared people who had made catastrophic choices and were finally facing the bill. I don't know how to let this go, I admitted quietly. The anger has been my fuel for so long. What do I burn if I give it up? You burn all the same things you're already burning, David said. Ambition, talent, vision. But maybe without the toxic smoke. We sat in silence, watching the last guests trickle out. Mrs. Helen Carter was among them, and to my surprise, she stopped to speak with Eleanor. The conversation was brief, but when they parted, Helen hugged her. Actually hugged her. Did you see that? David asked. I saw it. I don't know what it means. It means that people are capable of change. Not all of them, and not always in the ways we want, but sometimes. Maybe. Pastor Thompson emerged with my parents. They stood on the chapel steps looking lost. Robert put his arm around Eleanor's shoulders, and she leaned into him. They looked like survivors of a catastrophe of their own making, but a catastrophe nonetheless. Eleanor took the podium next. Even from this distance, I could see her hands shaking. Our daughter Chloe is not gone. She never was. We held a funeral because we couldn't face admitting we'd failed her as parents. We chose money and status over our child, and we've lived a lie for 12 years. More people left. The Sterling stormed out, Arthur's mother shouting something I still couldn't make out. Good. Let them feel the weight of their choices, too. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was an email from Ashley, marked urgent. A reporter from the New York Times had gotten wind of the story and wanted a statement. 3 local news stations were requesting interviews. Social media was already exploding with speculation. Should I handle the press? David asked, seeing me scroll through the messages. Let them report what they want. The truth is finally out there. That's what matters. But even as I said it, I wondered if that was really what mattered. The truth was satisfying, yes. Vindicating, certainly. But would it heal anything? Would it give me back the years I lost? Would it rebuild a family that had shattered? No. Nothing could do that. This was about drawing a line, making sure everyone knew exactly who was responsible for that shattering. A black Mercedes pulled up to the chapel, and a woman in her 60s stepped out. I recognized her immediately, Brenda Walsh, the society columnist for the local paper. She'd written my obituary 12 years ago, a glowing piece about a promising young woman cut down in her prime. Eleanor had kept a copy framed on the mantel. Brenda walked straight to my parents, her phone already out and recording. Mrs. Vance, Mr. Vance. Brenda Walsh from the Marin County Chronicle. Can you comment on today's revelation? Robert tried to wave her away, but Brenda was persistent. Is it true that you held a funeral for your daughter while she was alive? That you disowned her for refusing an arranged marriage? Eleanor's voice carried across the parking lot, surprisingly clear. Everything we said inside is true. We owe Chloe an apology that no words can adequately express, and we owe this community an apology for the deception. Where is Chloe now? Can we speak with her? Our daughter has built a remarkable life without us, Eleanor replied. She's successful, independent, and stronger than we ever gave her credit for. Whether she wants to speak to anyone is her choice. We've taken that choice away from her too many times already. Brenda pressed on. Sources say Chloe Davis, the tech billionaire, is your daughter. Can you confirm? Robert nodded slowly. She is. And we couldn't be more proud of what she's accomplished, even though we have no right to that pride. I watched Brenda's expression shift from professional detachment to genuine shock. The Chloe Davis? The one who just acquired Stellar Technologies? The same. The reporter was already typing furiously on her phone, probably alerting her editor to the massive story that had just landed in her lap. This wasn't just about a family's deception anymore. This was about one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the country, having risen from ashes her own parents tried to scatter. This is going to be everywhere by tonight, David observed. Your office is going to be flooded with calls. Good, I said, my stomach twisting even as the word left my lips. Let everyone know exactly what kind of people the Van Cess are. Let it be part of the public record forever. Part of me wanted exactly that, the permanent stain on their reputation, the social debt they'd inflicted on me, returned with interest. But another part, one I didn't want to acknowledge, felt something uncomfortably close to regret, watching them stand there facing Brenda's questions with a broken dignity. My phone rang again. Ashley. Miss Davis, your brother is still here. He's calmed down, but he says he needs to speak with you. He says it's about your father's health. That stopped me cold. What about his health? He won't say, just that it's important. I looked at David. Michael says something's wrong with my father. Could be manipulation. Could be true. I called Michael directly. He answered on the first ring. What's wrong with Dad? So now you care. His voice was bitter, but underneath it, I heard something else, fear. Just tell me, Michael. He had a heart attack 6 months ago. A mild one, but his doctor said another one could be fatal. The stress of everything, the money problems. Now this public confession. Mom's terrified he's going to collapse. I looked back at the chapel. Robert did look pale, his movements slower than I remembered. How had I not noticed? Why didn't you lead with that at the funeral? Because you wouldn't have cared. You've made it clear that we're all gone to you. You made me gone first. I'm just returning the favor. Chloe, please. I know you're angry. I know we all failed you, but is watching Dad potentially suffer a fatal event from stress really going to make you feel better? The question hit harder than I expected. Would it? Would my father suffering a fatal event at my feet finally satisfy the rage that had burned in me for over a decade? I thought about that 7-year-old girl with a scraped knee, and the father who patiently picked out every piece of gravel while telling her stories. I thought about the man who used to read to me every night, doing funny voices for all the characters. The father who taught me to ride a bike, to change a tire, to stand up for myself. Then I thought about the man who looked me in the eye at 19 and told me I was no longer his daughter unless I married Arthur Sterling. The man who planned an empty funeral and accepted condolences for a death he'd manufactured. The man who'd chosen money and reputation over his own child's well-being. Those were the same person. Somehow, the father who cared for my scraped knee and the father who disowned me were the same man. Tell Mom to take him to the emergency room if she's worried. I'm sure they can afford it now that I've cleared their debts. That's it? That's all you have to say? What do you want from me, Michael? Forgiveness? Reconciliation? A heartwarming family reunion where we all pretend the last 12 years didn't happen? I want you to be human. I want you to remember that we're still your family, even if we're broken. You stopped being my family when you eulogized me at a fake funeral. You want to know what I did that day after I watched from across the street? I went back to my car and I sat there for 3 hours, unable to move. I kept thinking about all the Thanksgivings and Christmases and birthdays that would never happen. I mourned you all just as thoroughly as you pretended to mourn me. Michael's voice broke. I didn't know what else to do. Mom and Dad were so sure about Arthur, so convinced it was the right move. I was 23 and stupid, and I believed them. You were old enough to have your own opinions. I was old enough to be a coward. There's a difference. The admission surprised me. Michael had never been one for self-reflection or accountability. Why are you telling me this now? Because I'm watching Mom and Dad lose everything. Their reputation, their friends, their dignity. And I realize you went through all of that alone at 19. You didn't have anyone to call for help. You didn't have a family to fall back on. And we did that to you. Through the car window, I watched my parents finally break away from Brenda and head toward their car. Robert stumbled, and Eleanor caught his arm, steadying him. They looked fragile. Breakable. Michael, I need to go. Wait, can we talk sometime? Not about them. About us. I miss my sister. Your sister was declared gone 12 years ago. You were at the funeral, remember? I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking. The rage that usually filled me when I thought about my family felt different now. Less clean, less righteous, muddied by complexity, and the uncomfortable reality that people could be both good and terrible, loving and destructive, worth saving and worth abandoning. You all right? David asked. No, I admitted, but I don't think I'm supposed to be. Pastor Thompson said a prayer, something about forgiveness and truth. Then it was over. The crowd dispersed, leaving my parents standing alone in front of the chapel. Eleanor looked directly at my car. We locked eyes across the distance, and I saw something I'd never expected to see. Not regret, exactly. Something deeper. Recognition, maybe. An acknowledgement that the daughter they tried to bury had not only survived, but thrived in ways they'd never imagined possible. I started the engine. Where to? David asked. The office. I have a meeting with the Dubai team in an hour. Life moved forward. Forbes ran a follow-up piece after someone leaked details about my parents' confession. The story went viral, sparking debates about family loyalty versus personal autonomy, parental control versus children's rights. I declined all interview requests on the topic. My parents moved to a smaller house in Vermont, paid for by the money I transferred. I kept my word on that front. Michael stopped texting after I ignored his messages for 3 weeks straight. 6 months later, I was in London closing a deal with a major automotive company when Ashley forwarded an email. The subject line read, "From your mother." I almost deleted it. My finger hovered over the trash icon for a full minute. Instead, I opened it. "Dear Chloe," it began. "I don't expect you to respond to this. I don't deserve your time or attention, but I wanted you to know that I've started volunteering at a women's shelter downtown. There's a girl there, about 19, who got kicked out by her family for refusing to quit college and get married. She reminds me of you. I've been helping her apply for scholarships and grants. I can't undo what I did to you, but maybe I can keep it from happening to someone else. Your mother." I read it 3 times, searching for manipulation or hidden agendas. Finding none didn't mean they weren't there. But the email felt different from the dinner invitation. More honest, raw in a way Eleanor had never been before. I didn't respond. But I did have David set up a trust fund in that girl's name, enough to cover her tuition and living expenses for 4 years. The paperwork listed the donor as anonymous, but I had David send Eleanor a copy of the executed documents with a single sentence, "Keep helping her. She deserves better than we got." My mother sent back one word, "Always." That was 8 months ago. I haven't heard from her since, which is somehow better than the alternative. We're not reconciled. We likely never will be. You can't rebuild a relationship from ashes when the foundation was poisoned from the start. But I sleep better now. The weight I've been carrying, the need to prove something to people who had proven themselves unworthy of my effort, has lifted. I built my empire for me, not to spite them. That realization came slowly, in quiet moments between meetings and acquisitions. Last week, I was going through old files and found a photo from my actual graduation. Not the fake funeral, but the real milestone my parents had skipped. I'm standing in my cap and gown, holding my diploma, completely alone in a sea of families celebrating their graduates. I looked terrified in that photo, lost. A girl pretending to be confident while her world crumbled around her. I printed a new photo to hang beside it, me cutting the ribbon at my headquarters, surrounded by my team, David beaming in the background. In this one, I'm genuinely smiling. Not the boardroom smile, but something real and earned. The girl in the graduation photo would be proud of the woman in the ribbon-cutting photo. That's enough. It has to be. My parents held a funeral for me 12 years ago. They thought they were burying my future, erasing the daughter who wouldn't conform. Instead, they gave me the greatest gift possible, absolute freedom from their expectations. I ceased to be that person that day. The obedient daughter who sought their approval disappeared into that empty casket. But someone else rose from those ashes, someone stronger, smarter, and utterly unwilling to compromise her worth for anyone's comfort. They can keep their regrets and their late-blooming conscience. I've got quarterly earnings to review and another acquisition to close by Friday. The gone don't need forgiveness. Do you ever truly heal from the wounds inflicted by family?